Well, now people want to give their time to instruction, to learn how to apply it, to learn how to take that philosophical, theoretical, scientific knowledge and personalize it, to demonstrate it, to initiate it in some way, to modify their behaviors and do something differently. And getting them to get their behaviors to match their intentions creates a new experience. And experience then is one of the things that enriches circuitry in the brain. It literally changes. I mean, learning is making connections, but experience is enriching those connections. And the side effect of a change in the circuitry in the brain when in the midst of an experience, that we begin to feel an emotion. And the emotion is the payoff from the experience. When you feel unlimited, when you feel gratitude, when you feel whole, when you feel in love with life, now you're teaching your body chemically to understand what your mind has intellectually understood. Now you're embodying the truth of that knowledge. The knowledge is actually making it into your genes, it's making it into your cells. And to me, we've done extensive brain scans. I now know people can change their brain in 1 hour. I've seen it. I know what a mystical experience looks like in the brain. I know how to induce it because we've studied it so much. I know when a person is in the midst of change, we can predict when it's happening. I know that people can begin to regulate emotional states and sustain them, that it can become a skill. We've seen gene changes in 4 days. We've seen immune regulation changes. We've seen telomere changes in 4 days and 60 days. That means you're lengthening your life. I think the best way to say it is, if you're not defined by a vision of the future, you're left with the memories of the past. And people literally believe in their past more than they believe in their future. That's why they talk about their past more than they talk about their future. People romance their past. They're more in love with their past than they are in love with the future. And people who actually create amazing things in their life just were more in love with their future, and they kept it alive in their mind every day. And they're like feeding a plant or a garden. They're tending to that future every single day, and the delight that comes with it, and the excitement that comes with it, and the emotions that come with it, cause them to literally change their brain and body over time to begin to look like the future has already happened. Now think about that. If there's evidence in your brain and body by thought alone, evidence that looks like you've already experienced your future, what does that mean? It's already happened. So relax, because it's going to find you, and it's going to come in a way that you least expect. That's the beauty behind this. If you could predict it, it's nothing new. It's got to surprise you. The brain learns by mistakes and surprises. So why not be surprised by an unknown coincidence or opportunity or synchronicity? And the moment you notice what you did inside of you that produced that effect outside of you, you're going to pay attention to what you did, and you're going to do it again, and you're going to believe less that you are the victim of your life. You know, someone or something is controlling your feelings and thoughts. So all of a sudden realizing your feelings and thoughts begin to create an outcome in your life. I think that experience then causes a human being to feel empowered. They start to believe in themselves more. And I think when we believe in ourselves, I think we believe in possibility. And when we believe in possibilities, I think we really believe in ourselves. And getting people to that point, to realize that nobody's excluded from this. You can't tell me any longer that you're too old to do this. We have brain scans of people in their 80s that will blow your mind. And you can't tell me you're too sick to do this work. I've seen super sick people with 50 brain tumors turn their life around. They have no brain tumors, 50 brain tumors.
Okay. Future.
You can't tell me that you had a turbulent past and you can't do this work. I've seen people that had the most abusive past. They're the happiest people in the world.
Okay.
You can't even tell me that you'd never meditated before, because many times the people who have never meditated have the most profound experience because they're not expecting anything. You can't tell me you're too overweight, you're too underweight. You can't tell me any of that. You can't tell me you're too this or too that. I've seen it in all shapes, all sizes, all colors, all ages. So then I wanted to see if people began to think differently, make different choices, do different things, create some new experiences, and feel and embrace different emotions. If that was new information coming into their nervous system, into the circulatory system, into their body, could we change the gene expression? Because we've witnessed people heal from cancer in a week. We've seen people with MS heal in a few days. We've seen people with Hashimoto's syndrome change, rare genetic disorders change. We've seen all kinds of things change. But you just can't leave it up to, oh, that just changed. You have to close the gap between knowledge and experience. And the other thing is that most people live by the same feelings every single day. You know, people wake up in the morning and your brain is a record of the past, so you wake up and you start thinking about your problems, and your problems are connected with certain people and things at certain times and places. The moment you start activating those circuits of memories related to the past experience and the environment you're thinking in the past, because every person, every thing, every place has a neurological network in your brain because you've experienced it. The end product of an experience is an emotion, so when you start thinking about your problems, you start feeling the emotions associated with them. You start feeling unhappy. So your thoughts are the vocabulary of your brain, your feelings are the vocabulary of your body. How you think and feel creates your state of being. So most people start their day, every single day, reaffirming their entire state of being in the familiar past.
Right.
Then they rush to the predictable future, right? And in doing that in unconscious and habitually. So then they go through the same routine behaviors that they've been doing for the last 5 years. And their habitat is reinforcing their habits, and they're going through a series of unconscious choices, behaviors, experiences, and emotions. They do that for 10 years. They're on autopilot, and their body's dragging them into a predictable future based on what they did in the past, and they've, in a sense, lost their free will to a program, right? And their body's dragging them into that genetic destiny. Trauma, disease, diagnosis, betrayal wakes people up from the program, right?
Okay.
So I assert, if you're not in the present moment, you're running a program. So if a person's living by guilt and they don't know it's guilt because it just feels like they've been feeling that way every single day or suffering, and those emotions are driving their thoughts, and if they can't think greater than how they feel, and feelings and emotions are a record of the past or thinking in the past. Now, if you believe that your thoughts have something to do with your destiny,
which most people do agree.
Well, yeah, so then your past is going to be your future.
Right.
We can, in fact, there's no magic there. You're going to lift your past up and set it on your future, and it's going to be a predictable life for most people, right?
But most people want to break that.
Of course, they just don't understand the formula, they don't understand the technology. So then the emotion drives the thought. The thought turns on the same circuits in the brain, produces the same neuropeptides that signal the same hormonal centers. You feel the same way. If you think you're a failure, you feel like a failure. Once you feel like a failure, you think you're more of a failure. And people get caught in these loops. When you embrace an emotion ahead of the actual experience in your environment, you're signaling the gene ahead of the environment. And your gene begins to change your protein expression, which means you've literally become the very person you want to be.
Okay. Now, how can you do that? How do you front run your emotions that way?
Well, it's just a formula. You have to learn how to make those internal changes. And after all the research, Brian, one of the things we realized is that there's a formula that we've actually been able to replicate that creates significant changes in brain coherence, your brain working better. In one study we did, we found out that 80% of our participants had a more than 90% change in their brain for the better in 4 days to create more heart coherence so that you can self-regulate your emotional state independent of what's going on in your outer environment. And so we've kind of narrowed it down to a formula. So the evidence that we're seeing in our scientific measurements sits on this side, and it's objective. It's not just subjective, you saying, oh, I feel better at the end of the event. No, well, we have science to prove that it's not just in your mind. It's in your brain. It's not just in your mind, it's in your body, right? And then there's this other arena that's starting to unfold that's actually surprising me on a daily basis, and I'm so changed because of it, because in our week-long events, we're witnessing miracles of biblical proportion. And I'm talking about blind people seeing, deaf people hearing, tumors shrinking, MS, huge changes, people with crutches and walkers or walking without them. I mean, we're seeing very significant changes taking place. And
how can you explain that stuff?
Well, here's what I know.
And why now and not for you 10, 15 years ago?
Because it's the 4-minute mile. So we now know if we give people numerous opportunities to connect, we give them a good model for them to wrap their mind around, and we give them an opportunity to overcome themselves, that as the week goes on, more and more people start hooking in, they start getting it. And all of a sudden, we have the first person stand up and say, hey, I know no one's going to believe this, but I've had MS for 21 years. I've been walking with crutches. I have not been able to feel my chest, my arms, my lips, my face. I've been struggling with motor function, sensory function. I haven't been seeing very well. And I don't know what happened after that meditation, but I felt a level of love I've never felt in my entire life. Now remember, the emotion is signaling the gene before they're ever in the environment. They're not waiting for the healing to feel the love for life. The love for life is actually creating the healing, right? So how you then get past that point and teach people how to do that. So now,
but you're breaking patterns that they could never break on their own.
well, we're moving a community of 1,000 people or 1,200 people from one state of mind and body to the other.
Right, so collective energy.
Collective energy.
Taking them to places they would normally never be.
Taking them further than they normally would go, because on the other side of their fear is courage. On the other side of their pain is freedom.
So fear would pull them back a lot of times if they tried to do this
Once
themselves.
they get to that uncomfortable feeling, they get to the edge, they stop. But if you can explain where that edge is and what that discomfort is, they're venturing to go. And then there's a disentangling of the programs for a day where people are in chaos, and you can measure brain activity, and there's dissonance, and the whole brain is in disorder, and that's when they want to quit.
Right.
But if they go one more time and they apply the formula, you see this massive reorganization take place, and all of a sudden, they're smiling. Now, the side effect of that, when that person with MS stands on the stage in front of 1,200 people and says, I got to tell you my story, and they tell you their story, and it's a real person. They don't look like a movie star, and it's not a Hollywood version, and they're not buffed and slender and look like a vegetarian or whatever. They're just a common person, and you can relate with them. I'm standing out looking in the audience, and I'm watching people well up with tears. They're witnessing a miracle, a transformation. You can't go back to business as usual. You can't go back to being the same person because you know so much. So then, whether it's a psychiatrist that has Parkinson's disease that did everything to take care of it, the next thing you know, he's standing on the stage saying, look, no tremors in his hand, I'm a psychiatrist, I'm just, something's happening to me, I'm going to keep going here. They're starting to believe in their future more than they're believing in their past. They tell that story, and people are listening to that story. The beauty behind it is they begin to relate with them, and it's like a 4-minute mile. Boom, you break that veneer, you pierce that level of consciousness, you break that level of awareness. And then as soon as the 4-minute mile was broken, 2 weeks later, the next person broke it, and then all of a sudden everybody started doing it. Well, it's the same collective consciousness that's happening. There's a footprint in consciousness in the field that people can step into.
In that room, or do you think around the world?
In the world, but more readily accessible in that room. Why? Because people are immersed in the environment. They're understanding the content. They're in the process of change themselves. That person now has just created a footprint for them to step into, and that person would be 72 years old, and here you are, a 45-year-old person just going, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. That's all we need, right? So the evidence then that people are witnessing in the room not only is a footprint in consciousness, but by the same means, it becomes something that they can associate in 3D reality with their senses. They're witnessing it, but they're not watching it on YouTube. There's 4 more days of the event left, and then all of a sudden the next person gets up there with Raynaud's syndrome, who has a vascular change in their hands, and they're swollen all the time.
And more and more evidence.
And then we have another. She tells a story, and another person with Raynaud's the next day stands up and said, "My Raynaud's gone." And then another person with Raynaud's, and then a person who's allergic to everything was wearing a mask.
Okay.
All of a sudden they start changing. So then what you start seeing is this collective movement, right? And so the evidence is the loudest voice.
Okay.
And it's louder than any other voice right now.
And to summarize what you're saying, say 10 or 15 years ago, people would come for the philosophy, for the knowledge, and they would sit there and say, okay, that sounds interesting, I'm gonna go back to my life and do that. These days, people, probably thanks to technology and YouTube and already knowing a lot of your ideas, they come, first of all, they go on YouTube seeking the knowledge to change, and then when they come to see you in live, they're like, I'm ready to go here.
Well, what I do know is that 15 years ago, people would go and listen to me and then shelve it. They didn't really participate in it because the first 15 years ago, the effects that we were producing was very minimal. Right. But there's a brush fire now. So when you come to say my week long, we're starting at 6 in the morning and we got to go, and we're finishing at 7 at night, and you're immersed. Right. And I'm pushing you right into your future, right? And I'm going to give you opportunities over and over again to say, what did I learn from the last meditation? What did I do well? Right. If I had another chance, what would I do better?
And everyone's more mentally prepared.
And you're talking to the person next to you, and you're struggling, and they say, my God, I was trying so hard yesterday, and I just let go, and I had the most incredible experience of my life. And you're looking, going, I was about ready to quit. No, that's what was going to happen to me yesterday. So community all of a sudden becomes this collective energy of connection where people are all moving in the same direction, just like those flocks of birds in Brighton, the starlings or the fish that are moving. You start getting this one mind, this one heart, this collective movement, and there's power, such power in that.
For the people that this is making a lot of sense to, but they're still stuck in this daily routine, and logically this all makes sense. How do you get people to make that first step where they can maybe have that one day or that 1 hour where they're like, wow, I actually just took everything Dr. Joe said and I see a little bit of evidence. Maybe I can now take the next step and the next step.
Yeah.
Because again, the other day I was trapped in my own little anger cycle, and I've got all the knowledge in the world and some great experience with you, and I couldn't think my way out of it.
Yeah. If you can't think greater than how you feel, we've studied the brain scans of people who are thinking in a meditation within some disturbing emotion. And 100% of the time, Brian, they make their brain worse. They are driving it further into higher beta brainwave patterns because, first of all, the arousal of the stress hormones is causing you to become overly analytical, and analysis isn't going to do it. Even the insight from analysis isn't going to change it. And then secondly, the emotion is a record of the past, so you're thinking in the past. The solution is getting beyond it. So breaking that cycle is shorten the refractory period of those emotional reactions is the gift, right? And I don't care that you react. The question is, how long are you going to react, right? That's the fundamental question. So it's trial and error. It's trial and error. And if you get enough people beginning to figure out this formula, as an example, we have Bond University on the Gold Coast in Australia, the only privately funded university in all of Australia that is analyzing a lot of our brain research data. And the first thing the researcher said to me was, we have never, in all the studies we've done, we've never seen people be able to change their brainwaves as quickly and as efficiently as this particular group. The scale is off the chart. So we now know that people are doing it, right? We know that they're doing it. So then my interest is, once I know that they know how to apply that formula, let's see what they can do by applying the formula to the next level. Giving them the understanding the science, build a model, and then let's put them in a situation to see then if they can master that next level. And by doing a very similar thing, but by just advancing the understanding and doing something extra. And what would the outcome would be? And as an example, well, I healed myself of stage 4 cancer. Okay, well, if I heal myself, is it possible to heal someone else? That's a good question. And what would be the science to do that? So we've set up these opportunities for people to really practice creating a coherent field of energy in a person that's sick, and we have seen dramatic, and I mean dramatic, changes in people's health instantaneously, because it's not matter that emits a field. When you study the science, it's the field that creates matter. If you change the field, you're going to change matter, and that just takes a change in belief, because most people think they need to change the matter, they need to change the tumor. It's not your job to change the tumor. That's matter to matter. You have to change the pattern or the information in the field.
Okay, when I'm stuck in my anger loop, I need to use another emotion to get myself out of that. Not the analytical thinking.
Well, we also know that when a person is in an environment that's remotely familiar to the event, even to the smallest measure where they can associate something, a small little trigger, they're going to have that same emotion consume them, literally consume them. So the problem is not that it's just in the brain, Brian. The problem is it's in the body as well, because it's the emotion that's conditioning the body subconsciously into the past. And now we're 5% conscious mind, 95% subconscious mind. So then that becomes a very profoundly distinct program for that person. So they lose interest in any other thing that is not related to the emotion they're experiencing. In fact, no new information can enter their nervous system that isn't equal to the emotion that they're experiencing, because it's not relevant. They're in survival. Survival says, be prepared for what's about ready to happen. Be prepared for the worst. Be ready. Don't let it get you this time. Know what you're going to do, and it's usually, a very primitive reaction.
So you're not present. You're not evolving. You're not open to any new emotions or anything.
Right. So there's been great research done on different energy psychology techniques like EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprogramming. I've seen the scans. People will begin to recall the event, and the emotion starts to lose its charge. Now, a memory without the emotional charge is wisdom. Now you're free from your past, right? But it's not the conscious mind that's involved. That the REM movement, the eye movement in EMDR, is simulating REM sleep, and you're able to consolidate memories differently that people with trauma sometimes don't dream, or they dream the same dream. EFT, emotional freedom technique, tapping and associating it with certain emotions, kind of like a psychological acupuncture, tends to release energy out of the body, and it lowers cortisol levels significantly. The meditation, a lot of times, when you can give people the proper instruction and set up these conditions in their environment where they feel safe enough, that for me, it's never about the event. The event is incidental. It's about the emotion. So then when you start lowering the volume to that emotion, and you teach a person how to get beyond the analytical mind, enter the operating system where those subconscious programs exist, change their brainwaves, and begin to make significant changes. When they start making those subconscious changes, they're less reactionary. You teach them how to find the present moment. You teach them over time the tedium returning back to the present moment and managing their attention, managing their energy. And you are literally training an animal that has really poor manners. The body's been just conditioned to be like a feral animal that's in survival, but when you start working with it and you keep settling it down, you're breaking that conditioning response and you're telling it it's no longer the mind of anger, that you're the mind. And then this is where David starts slaying Goliath. This is where every time you start doing that, in the beginning it takes a lot of effort and a lot of energy. But if you keep practicing it, we have so many brain scans to show so many people healing from anxiety and depression. You can't be anxious if you're in the present moment. You can't be depressed if you're in the present moment. You're in the present moment. You're not thinking about the future or the past, and you start managing that world. Then the body that's holding on to that emotion, when it finally gets trained, like training an animal to sit, if you're working with it, sooner or later, if you keep telling it and training it to sit, sooner or later it's going to acquiesce, sooner or later it's going to surrender to another mind. And when that happens, boom, there's this liberation of energy.